Hello everyone. I'm the storyteller from the channel Whispered Tales and I'm here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from? At what time are you watching? Now, get comfortable and relax. The road narrowed after dusk. Ilara hadn't seen another car for over an hour. The two-lane highway had curved into gravel, then crumbled into a single winding path that led her deeper into the woods of Hollow Creek. Trees pressed in from both sides, their black limbs scraping at the silver sky like the gnarled fingers of something long buried, now reaching out again. Even her car seemed to grow quieter the closer she drew to the town, as though the air itself swallowed sound. She flicked on her headlights. They barely cut through the fog. The GPS had lost its signal 10 miles ago. She didn't mind. The directions were written out on a folded piece of yellowed paper, handwritten in neat, almost antique script, sent by the estate lawyer after her great-aunt's death. Miss Ilara Morningside, the envelope had read. You are the sole heir of the Greystone house, situated just past Hollow Creek. The key, old and cold and heavy, had been taped to the letter with a thin strand of twine. Ilara remembered her mother once mentioning the name, Greystone House, but only in passing. A family house no one had lived in for decades. Forgotten, like a dream chased away by morning light. Now, it would be hers. She took a deep breath as the trees parted and a rusted sign came into view, hanging crooked over the road, Welcome to Hollow Creek. Population, unreadable. The town didn't look like much. A cluster of buildings squatted under the weight of the woods, with roofs patched in tin and chimneys like watchtowers. A general store. A post office. One gas station, abandoned, with windows painted over in ash. A narrow creek slithered alongside the road, its surface glassy and still, reflecting nothing. She didn't see anyone. No movement. No lights in the windows. As she passed through, she realized the buildings weren't just quiet, they were listening. The house appeared without warning. Greystone sat at the end of a weeping gravel path, flanked by twisted trees that hadn't shed their leaves, even in the still chill of late fall. Ivy choked the stone walls like veins beneath skin. The windows were long and narrow, like slits in a mask. Above the arched front door, a carved emblem had eroded with age, worn to near invisibility. Ilara parked the car in front. The headlights illuminated the porch for a moment before she turned them off, leaving only twilight and the hush of the woods. She stepped out and breathed in damp earth, wood smoke, and something older. She stood in front of the door, feeling the key between her fingers. The metal resisted slightly as it slid into the lock. Click. The door opened inward with a long sigh. The interior of the house was colder than outside. Her breath fogged. The air smelled of stone and parchment, like a forgotten library. Shadows clung to the walls even after she turned on the dusty overhead light. There was a grand staircase in the center, framed by woodwork carved into elaborate curling patterns, almost like vines or tendrils, some natural, some not quite. The banister was smooth and dark, untouched by time. To her right, a sitting room with a fireplace, stone cold. An old clock stood in the corner, its face covered by a sheet of gauze-like cobweb. The furniture was shrouded in white sheets, but no dust lay on the floor. It was clean. Too clean. She walked across the room, her footsteps swallowed by the thick wood. Every sound she made echoed slightly, not around her, but underneath her. As if there was space below, deep below, hollow and waiting. There were mirrors on nearly every wall. Tall, antique mirrors in ornate frames, many of them facing one another. She passed one and glanced, then stopped. The reflection was normal, mostly. Except the hallway behind her was a little darker in the mirror than in reality. And there was something like a shimmer, far down the corridor. A flicker of motion that didn't exist when she turned around. She faced forward again. The shimmer was gone. Upstairs, she found the bedroom left for her. The sheets were neatly folded, the mattress made. A small oil lamp rested beside the bed on a nightstand carved from dark wood. A note lay next to it, written in the same delicate hand as the letter she'd received. The house remembers its own. Rest well. The listening hour comes soon. There was no signature. She frowned, fingers brushing over the ink. It was dry, written long ago. She read the last sentence again and again, until the words began to feel less like instructions and more like a warning. The listening hour. What an odd phrase. Still, it had been a long drive. Her eyes were heavy, and despite the eerie quiet of the place, or perhaps because of it, her body was desperate for sleep. She changed into the clothes from her overnight bag, lit the oil lamp, and slid beneath the thick old quilt. The house creaked once, like an exhale. That night, the dreams began. Not nightmares, not exactly. In the dream, she stood in a forest not unlike the one outside. But the trees were taller, and blacker, their branches forming a dome over the sky. The air was still. The sky above was full of stars that didn't blink. And behind her, something stood. She didn't turn around. Couldn't. But she felt it watching. Then came the sound, a soft whisper, like pages turning underwater. Not words, not at first. Just the hush of something too old to speak. Then, you hear it, don't you? Elara woke in the dark. The room was silent. The house unmoving. But the whisper, somehow, had followed her out of the dream. It echoed in her ears like a memory, soft and low, repeating something just beneath comprehension. She sat up, heart beating quietly in the hush of the night. 2:13 a.m. The clock on the nightstand ticked once, then stopped. She rose from bed, wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, and stepped into the hallway. The floorboards didn't creak. She walked slowly past the tall mirrors, each one showing a version of herself bathed in soft amber light from the oil lamp. In one mirror, she could have sworn her reflection lagged behind. Just slightly. A delay in motion, as if the mirror wasn't a reflection at all, but a window. Something whispered again. This time from beneath her feet. She pressed her ear to the wooden floor, breath shallow. A voice. Muffled. Faint. We see you. Elara jerked back. Her skin felt chilled, her thoughts like ice. But as she stood, the whisper faded. The house held its breath. She returned to bed eventually, heart still steady but her thoughts caught on a thread of something ancient and cold. She didn't sleep deeply after that, but the rest of the night passed without event. When dawn came, the house was as it had been. Silent. Still. And yet, the moment her eyes opened, she knew something had changed. Something had noticed her arrival. Something beneath the floor. Morning in Hollow Creek didn't arrive so much as seep through the trees. Gray light filtered in through the curtains, weak and diffused. Elara lay still in bed, listening. There were no birds. No rustling of wind through trees. Only silence, thick and expectant, like the house was waiting for her to move first. She sat up slowly. The blankets were colder than she remembered. The clock beside her bed read 7:41 a.m., but it hadn't ticked once since the hour had stopped the night before. She touched the wood floor with her bare feet. It was warm. Too warm. Downstairs, she lit the fireplace in the sitting room, though the day was not especially cold. She needed the motion. The ritual. The comfort of flame. The fire took quickly, crackling like something eager. She pulled the white cloths from the furniture. A couch upholstered in thick, dark velvet. A high-backed armchair with patterns of spirals carved into the wood. Each piece was old but well preserved, like the house had never truly been abandoned. Or, perhaps, it had never been empty. The mirrors still lined the walls. She stood before the largest one, next to the fireplace. Her reflection stared back, quiet and still. Her eyes looked tired, the way eyes do after dreaming too long. But her reflection matched her, this time. Almost. She reached out and touched the glass. It was cold. There was a sound behind her then, a soft clicking, rhythmic and distant, like fingernails on wood. She turned, expecting to see something. But the room was empty. The fire crackled. The sound stopped. She explored the kitchen next. The pantry still held tins of preserved food, far too many for any modern household. Each label bore dates from decades ago, yet none showed signs of decay. There were tea tins, sugar cubes in a glass jar, flour in a cloth sack tied with red string. In the corner of the kitchen, near a boarded-up window, she found something odd, a small iron bell nailed to the wall. It had no rope or striker. It looked ceremonial, as though it were meant to mark time rather than signal someone. Beneath it, etched directly into the wall, was a message in the same spidery handwriting she was beginning to recognize: "Do not ring before the hour." She leaned closer, tracing her fingers over the message. The wood was warm here, too, warmer than the rest of the kitchen, as if the wall breathed behind it. She made tea and sipped it in silence. Even the clink of the spoon against the cup felt loud in that still house. Outside, the woods stretched endlessly in every direction. The trees were all wrong. Some bent toward the house, others leaned away. A few seemed to twist mid-trunk, frozen in motions that defied gravity and growth. She saw no birds. No insects. Only the distant outline of the creek glinting between trees. She stepped off the porch and walked the perimeter of the house. Roots knotted beneath the soil, rising in places like veins. She paused at the far edge of the house where a tangle of weeds choked what had once been a garden path. Something metal gleamed faintly under the dirt. She knelt and uncovered it. An old sundial, covered in moss. Its gnomon, the triangular piece that casts shadow, was missing. In its place sat a tiny stone figurine. A headless figure with outstretched arms, offering nothing. She left it there. The sun was rising higher now, but its warmth never reached her skin. That night, she went to bed early. Not because she was tired, but because the silence of the house made staying awake unbearable. She lay beneath the quilt with the oil lamp burning low beside her. The shadows on the ceiling drifted like mist. Her thoughts wandered to the whispering she'd heard the night before. The dream. The shimmer in the mirror. She wondered if tonight would bring more. She wasn't wrong. She woke to the sound of the clock ticking. It had not moved in nearly 24 hours. The sound was slow, deliberate, like each second dragged through molasses. 2:13 a.m. exactly. She sat up. The room was dark, save for the oil lamp, which now burned with a pale blue flame. She didn't remember lighting it. The air smelled faintly of old soil and parchment. The whispers returned. This time, louder. Still muffled, like through water or glass, but unmistakably real. She swung her legs out of bed and walked softly toward the hallway. The sound was coming from below. From the floor. From beneath it. She knelt again and pressed her ear to the floorboards. The voice was clearer now. Buried deep, we wait. Then another voice, fainter, higher-pitched, layered behind the first. The door is thin, you are close. Ilara shuddered. She stood and backed away slowly. Then she noticed something in the mirror. A shape, low to the floor, right where she had been kneeling. It was gone the moment she turned around. In the morning, she found a door she hadn't seen before. At the back of the hallway near the stairs, behind a faded tapestry, was a narrow wooden door that led to a linen closet, or so she thought. When she opened it, she found stairs leading down into darkness. The scent of cold stone and ancient dampness rose to meet her. She did not go down. Not yet. But she stood there for a long time, listening. No whisper came this time. Only her breath, echoing softly off unseen stone. She closed the door and let the tapestry fall over it again. She was beginning to understand something. The house wasn't haunted in the traditional sense. It didn't creak and slam doors or summon flickering shadows in corners. It didn't threaten her. It listened. It whispered. And it waited. That afternoon, she found the attic. The ladder unfolded smoothly from the ceiling above the second-floor hallway. Dust drifted in the air, dancing in the pale sunlight streaming from a high circular window. The attic was vast, lined with old furniture and crates marked with names she half recognized from faded family records. In the far corner, a small writing desk sat beneath the window. On it rested a collection of journals, bound in leather, cracked with age, yet untouched by dust. She opened one. The handwriting was neat and consistent. Each entry began with a date. The earliest was from 1891. The pages spoke of the house. Of strange noises. Of dreams that felt like memories. Of people who came to visit and left changed. Of something called the listening hour. She turned more pages. One passage stood out, underlined in trembling ink: "The hour is not a time, but a space. It opens when the house wills it. Not all who hear the whispers are chosen, but all who are chosen must answer." Another read, "They live beneath the foundation, between the bricks and beams, behind the breath of the house. They do not sleep." She closed the book and held it against her chest. The silence was no longer comforting. It was too full. That night, she dreamt again. This time, she stood in a long corridor of mirrors. Each reflected a different version of her: older, younger, joyful, frightened, asleep. In one mirror, she saw herself sitting at the attic desk, weeping. In another, standing in the cellar, arms outstretched toward the dark. A figure appeared at the far end of the hall. Pale and featureless. It whispered something she couldn't hear. She turned to run, but the mirrors shifted. Each reflection now watched her with empty eyes. She woke again at 2:13 a.m. The whispers had grown louder. The voice now spoke words she understood. Elara. It knew her name. The morning light brought no warmth. Outside, mist hugged the ground in thick swaths, stretching into the forest like fingers creeping home. Elara stood at the window of the attic, watching the trees blur and sway with a rhythm that didn't match the wind. The woods moved to their own tempo. Slow. Ancient. She clutched the journal she'd found the night before, flipping through the entries again. There were dozens of them. Some were short, cryptic, just a single line. Others rambled for pages in looping, anxious script. All spoke of the same thing: the whispers. The house. The feeling of being watched not from the outside, but from within. She found one entry dated October 16, 1912. "Last night the house spoke clearly. Not in metaphor, nor memory. It used my name. I woke at 2:13 and heard it not with ears, but with marrow. It beckons downward. Always downward. I have resisted the cellar, but resistance weakens with knowledge." Another from May 3, 1928, "I opened the listening room today. Dustless. Waiting. The floor sings at the hour. The walls breathe. It wants someone to remember. It wants someone to stay." And finally, one that made her breath slow, "I heard her. Elara. My great niece. She is not yet born, and yet I heard her walking above me. She will come. The house will know her." The signature was smudged, but the initials remained: R.M. Her great-aunt. That afternoon, Elara returned to the hidden door behind the tapestry. The cellar steps descended into complete darkness. This time, she brought a lantern, the oil wick crackling softly as she moved. Dust floated like fog in the air, disturbed by her presence. The stairs went down further than the house should allow. Far beyond a simple cellar. The walls transitioned from wood to stone, then to something darker, rough and uneven, like volcanic rock. The scent of wet ash filled her nose. She counted the steps. 29. Then 30. Then 31. At step 42, she stopped. The air was thick here, humming faintly, like a deep note held by invisible strings. And at the base of the steps, a door. It wasn't made of wood. It was metal, old, rusted, riveted with patterns resembling roots or veins. A handle, smooth from use, jutted out like a bone. There was no lock. Only a small engraving at eye level. She held the lantern close to read it. To listen is to open. To open is to remain. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the handle. But she didn't turn it. Not yet. Instead, she placed her ear to the metal. The whisper was clearer than it had ever been. Elara. Come see. We remember. She stepped back and closed her eyes, grounding herself in her breath. Then she ascended the stairs, slowly, every step a struggle against some magnetic pull beneath her feet. The house didn't protest. But it was listening. Always listening. Later, she visited the village. The townspeople were few. A scattering of quiet, pale figures who watched her with veiled curiosity, like she was a bird that had wandered too far into the woods. She asked about the house, carefully. Most looked away. One old man at the general store, face lined like cracked bark, finally answered. "You're stayin' in Greystone?" he asked, voice low and dry. She nodded. He glanced around, then said, "Ain't nobody lived there for more than a week in near 40 years. I had family there," she said. "Our Morningside." The man flinched, just slightly. She was the last who kept it quiet, he muttered. Knew how to listen without answering. That's the trick. Don't answer. What happens if you do? He looked at her then, eyes pale blue and milky. You stop being just yourself. Back in the attic, she explored further. Behind a large wardrobe, she found another journal, this one older than the others, the cover cracked and brittle with age. The handwriting inside was different, harsh strokes, letters carved more than written. The entries were unsettling. We built on their bones. The drowned ones. The voices. The land shifted when we raised the walls. We thought we buried them deep enough. The flood took the village, but not the souls. They sank, but did not leave. When the waters dried, they stayed beneath. The listening hour is when they speak. That is when the veil thins. The house keeps them bound. We, the keepers, must record what they say. That is the pact. A pact. Her breath caught as she turned the page and found a diagram, rough but clear. The outline of the house, and beneath it, a spiral. A maze of tunnels. And in the center, marked only by a single word, sanctum. That night, the house felt tighter. The walls closer. The whispers louder. She sat on her bed with the oil lamp beside her and tried to steady her thoughts, but the hour approached with a strange sense of inevitability. The clock began ticking just before it arrived. 2:13, the sound came not from beneath this time, but from the very walls. From the air. The voices layered, some pleading, others reciting numbers, some chanting things in languages she didn't recognize. And then one that chilled her blood. Why did you leave us, Elara? Her breath stopped. She stood, trembling, and walked toward the mirror. This time, she didn't see her reflection. She saw the attic. But it was not the attic as it was now. It was older. Candlelit. Filled with people in dark robes, heads bowed, surrounding a book that floated in the air before them. Their faces were hidden, but their shadows danced on the walls in unnatural ways, stretching and twisting. And in the center of the group stood someone who looked like her. Exactly like her. The image vanished as quickly as it came. She turned, heart pounding, and caught her breath as she noticed something at the bedroom door. A slip of parchment had been pushed under it. She picked it up, hands shaking. The writing was familiar. "You are the last. The hour draws near. Find the book. Or the house will take you too." There was no signature. Only a single, drawn spiral at the bottom of the page. She knew what she had to do now. The cellar. The spiral. The sanctum. The listening hour was not just a phenomenon, it was a bridge. And she had been chosen to cross it. But why? And what waited on the other side? She didn't sleep that night. Only waited. The day passed like a breath held too long. Elara barely ate. She barely moved. The house pulsed with quiet anticipation, the walls humming with something ancient and wordless. It wasn't just her imagination now, she could feel the house breathing. Inhales and the creak of floorboards. Exhales and the sigh of doors that opened on their own. At twilight, she dressed in layers. Something told her it would be cold where she was going. Lantern in hand, she returned to the door at the base of the cellar stairs. The metal glistened faintly, as though the surface had been polished by unseen hands in the night. She reached for the handle. This time, the door turned with a soft, wet click. It opened into a tunnel that sloped downward, far deeper than should have been possible beneath a house. The walls here were not built but grown, twisting roots and stone, pulsing faintly with lightless color, like the inside of a living vein. The air was damp and cold. Her breath fogged the glass of the lantern. The door closed behind her without sound. She didn't try to open it again. The passage wound like a snake. Time slipped. There were no markings, no sounds but the soft tap of her boots and the drip of distant moisture. Sometimes she thought she heard footsteps behind her, but when she turned, there was only the tunnel, twisting endlessly behind. Finally, the walls opened into a wide, circular chamber. The sanctum. The space was immense, impossible beneath the modest house above. The floor was carved stone, arranged in a spiral that wound toward a pedestal in the center. Shelves carved into the walls held hundreds of books, scrolls, bones etched with words, candles that burned without flame. And on the pedestal sat the book. It pulsed faintly. Elara approached, reverently. Her hands shook as she reached out to touch the cover. It was warm, almost feverish. When she opened it, the pages turned on their own. And then it spoke. Not aloud. In her mind. "Welcome, listener." The words on the pages rearranged themselves with every blink. Names, dates, images. She saw visions of those who came before her, her aunt, her great-grandmother, shadowy figures cloaked in ritual, each called by the house, each marked by the hour. She saw Hollow Creek as it once was, a village drowned, not by flood, but by something summoned. A mistake made long ago. A breach. The listening hour had begun as a way to communicate. To apologize. To contain. But over time, it became a rhythm. A contract. One must listen, or the voices break free. The book showed her what came next. She would return to the house. She would wait. And when the hour struck, she would sit before the mirror in the fireplace room and write what she heard. Only then would the spiral close for another day. She left the sanctum without memory of how she reached the stairs. The door closed behind her and this time, it locked itself. The cellar was darker than before. But the house no longer resisted her. It felt grateful. That night, she sat before the mirror at 2:13. Candle burning. Book open. Pen in hand. The voices came. Hundreds of them. Telling stories. Memories. Names long forgotten. Desperate to be heard, remembered, etched into reality before they faded. Her hand moved without command. She wrote for hours. Tears slid down her cheeks, not from fear, but from something else. Recognition. One voice, faint and trembling, whispered, "You remembered me." After all this time, by dawn, the candle had burned down to nothing. The mirror no longer showed her reflection. Only the spiral, drawn in silver on endless black. Elara whispered back, "I hear you." And the house exhaled. For the first time, in years, it was at peace. For now. The morning after the listening hour, Elara awoke on the floor of the drawing room. The book lay beside her, its pages closed and still warm. Her hand ached. Ink stained her fingers and sleeve. She had written through the night, yet remembered only fragments, words that didn't feel like hers, moments that belonged to other lives. She turned to the mirror. Still no reflection. Only the spiral. It shimmered faintly, as if alive beneath the glass. She reached out to touch it, and this time, her hand passed through. Cold washed over her skin, like slipping into deep water. She pulled her hand back, breath shallow, and stared. Her fingers were damp. Not with water, but with something thicker. Oily. And in her palm, a mark began to form, lines coiling inward, like a brand. The spiral. Small, but unmistakable. The house had accepted her. But something else had marked her too. That evening, the atmosphere shifted. A low hum returned, stronger than before. She felt it in the floorboards. In her chest. Even the windows seemed to pulse gently with it. As if the house were preparing for something. She returned to the attic, driven by instinct more than logic. There, she found the hidden drawer in the writing desk had opened. Inside was a single page. Older than the rest. The ink was dark red. Not ink at all. When the listener begins to remember what she never lived, the cycle enters its final phase. Do not trust the mirror. He watches through it. He waits. The page was unsigned. But a symbol marked the bottom. Not the spiral. Something else. An eye, staring wide and lidless, with a slit pupil shaped like a keyhole. That night, the whispers were not waiting for the hour. They began before sunset. Soft at first, like sighs in the floorboards. Then louder, layered, overlapping. And among them, a new voice. Lower. Singular. Not a memory. A presence. Elara. It spoke her name like it owned it. She froze. You are closer now. You opened the gate. You bear the mark. The listener must become the door. She whispered, "Who are you?" No answer. Only laughter, dry, slow, cracking like the bones of old trees. She ran to the fireplace room. The mirror still showed no reflection. Only the spiral. Then it began to move. Turning, slowly, like a whirlpool. Shapes formed within it, figures. Faces. Some human. Others, not. Stretching and twisting, pressing against the other side of the glass as though it were thin ice. At the center stood a man. Or what had once been a man. Tall, thin, cloaked in a shadow that flickered like dying flame. Where his face should have been, only that same lidless eye. He raised a finger. And the spiral stopped turning. She fell back, gasping. The mirror was a prison. A veil. And he was watching through it. Always had been. She retreated to the attic and locked the door. The book was there again, open to a page she hadn't turned. A new entry was being written as she watched. Ink bloomed on the page, letter by letter. When the listener becomes the door, the one who waits will cross. He will wear her name, her face, her life. The village will rise. The drowned will sing. And the gate will remain open. At the bottom, do not listen alone. She whispered, but I'm the only one left. The book closed. At 2:13, the house shifted. The walls flexed. The mirror cracked. A hairline fracture, from edge to edge. She didn't write that night. Instead, she listened. And for the first time, the whispers weren't confined to memory. They came through the walls. Through the mirror. Through the air. And among them, one phrase repeated over and over, in 100 different voices, "He is almost here." In the morning, Elara stood outside. The forest around Hollow Creek was silent. No birds. No wind. The air held a tension, like breath held between storms. And in the distance, near the tree line, she saw figures. People. Watching. Not moving. Their faces were pale and familiar. From her dreams. From the mirror. From the book. They were waiting, too. Elara stood before the cracked mirror until the hour passed. When the spiral stopped spinning, so did her breath. She no longer felt like a guest in the house. She felt like part of it. Not simply watched, but known. As if the walls whispered not around her, but through her. Her bones ached with stories not her own. Her dreams no longer belonged to her. And the spiral in her palm had darkened, now black as ink, etched like a brand into her skin. It pulsed, softly. A heartbeat. Not hers. The book gave her no answers that morning. Its pages were blank. The ink had bled away, absorbed back into the paper like water drawn into thirsty roots. She slammed it shut and pressed her forehead to the wood, whispering, "What do you want from me?" The answer came not from the book, but from the cellar. A sound like stone scraping against stone. The metal door had opened itself. The tunnel had changed. No longer cold and damp, but warm, feverish, like the air in a sealed tomb. The spiral path to the sanctum was different too. The walls, once tangled roots and stone, now moved gently as she passed, as if breathing. Shapes twitched just beyond her lantern's reach. Fingers. Faces. She didn't look too closely. When she reached the sanctum, she gasped. It had grown. The spiral path now towered over a chasm. The pedestal remained in the center, but the shelves had shifted, curving downward into a black pit beneath the floor. And hanging above the pedestal, was the mirror. No longer cracked. No longer glass. It pulsed, liquid and dark, like a curtain of oil rippling without wind. From behind it, a voice spoke. "You are ready." Elara stepped forward, heart pounding. Ready for what? The voice smiled, though it had no mouth. To become. The book opened on the pedestal, pages flipping furiously. One landed flat. She read. The listener is not a role. It is a threshold. The house does not trap the dead. It contains the memory of the drowned. But memory is hungry. And the door must open. She looked at the mirror. The eye symbol shimmered faintly in its center. And a form began to appear. The one who waits. Taller now. Less man, more shape. Smoke with limbs. A grin like fracture lines in stone. And behind him, rows of figures, all bearing her face. Not copies. Not illusions. Versions. Lives she never lived. Choices she never made. All drawn here by the spiral. She fell to her knees. "I don't understand," she whispered. The voice answered gently, "You are the ending we were promised. The last chapter. The listener who remembers the lives never lived." Behind her, the sanctum began to sing. A low, rhythmic vibration rising in the stone and through her bones. The spiral on the floor glowed. The mirror rippled violently, and the eye opened wider. The one who waits extended a hand. Not through the mirror. From behind her. She turned. Nothing there. But the mark on her palm flared with heat. And a voice, her voice, spoke inside her head, "He is not behind you. He is beneath you. He is inside the spiral." She understood. The spiral was not a symbol. It was a path inward. Not to the sanctum. To herself. To the core of what the house remembered. And what it needed to forget. With shaking hands, she stepped into the spiral on the floor. 1 foot forward. Then another. Each step dimmed the lantern. Each step grew the voice inside her. And the farther she walked, the more her name faded. Until she could no longer remember it. Then, silence. And darkness. Not the absence of light, but the presence of something else. A womb of memory. She floated there for seconds, or centuries. And then she saw it. The truth beneath the house. The drowned village was not destroyed. It was fed. The spiral was not a prison. It was a mouth. And the one who waits? Not a man. Not a demon. A hunger. Born of forgotten guilt. Kept alive by listening. And now, ready to feed. In the center of the spiral, a final door appeared. Made of black wood. Her reflection stood in front of it, one of the others. One of the Alaras that came before. She reached out. Touched her own hand. And whispered, "Choose." If she opened the door, the hunger would cross. But if she stayed, if she took her place as the listener forever, she could keep the door shut. At a cost. Her name. Her voice. Herself. She opened her mouth to answer. And then, everything stopped. Silence pressed around Alara like ocean weight. Her breath, if she still breathed, moved in rhythm with the spiral. Each slow beat pulled her farther from what she was, from everything she'd remembered, from her name. She stood before the final door. A black arch, grown from roots and bone, dripping with ink that steamed in the cold nothingness of this place. And there, standing in front of it, was her. Another Alara. One she had not lived. Older, hollow-eyed, smiling with sadness. She held out her hand. "Do you remember who we are?" Alara tried to speak. Nothing came. She looked down. The mark on her palm had spread, curling up her arm like ivy, like writing without language. It wasn't pain, it was erasure. She was being rewritten. The book had said, "Do not listen alone." But there was no one left to listen with her. No one but them. Herself. The self she might have been. They emerged from the edges of the spiral one by one. Some bore burn marks, as if they'd lived through fire. Others wept blood. One dragged a broken mirror behind her. Another whispered names into the air, over and over, as if afraid they would disappear. They circled the door like sentinels. The hunger had fed on all of them. She was the last. The one who waits emerged from the dark beyond the door. Not fully formed, still a shape, a voice, a shadow stitched together from all the drowned memories it had consumed. "You have seen what we are," it said. "You know what waits beyond." She nodded, slowly. Yes. She saw it now. The door didn't open into the world, it opened into the self. The spiral was an invitation inward. A trap for identity. Once the listener gave in, the hunger took everything: memory, selfhood, possibility. The one who waits had never been a single being. It was a tide of forgotten selves. A collector. A mirror that fed on what people left behind. And now it wanted her. Not to devour, to complete. "Why me?" she whispered. Not out loud, no lips moved. The words vibrated from her bones. The other Elara smiled. "Because we all chose. In every spiral. One of us said yes." The door began to pulse. She stepped forward. Behind her, the book appeared again, hovering in air, its pages blank but glowing. A new line formed: the listener remembers. The hunger forgets. Only one can remain. The one who waits extended a hand. Not clawed. Not monstrous. Human. Her hand. And then, suddenly, Elara saw a third option. It wasn't the door. It wasn't silence. It was the book. What if she wrote the story herself? What if she didn't listen? What if she spoke back? The spiral flared to life. Voices screamed in protest. The other Elaras stepped back, flickering like old film. The one who waits growled, not angry, but surprised. Elara grabbed the book. Held it to her chest. And began to write. Her name, first. Then her memories. Her choices. Her pain. Every forgotten version of her screamed through the spiral. She wrote them, too. She wrote them whole. She wrote them real. And in doing so, she made the spiral remember. The sanctum shook. The door cracked. Not open, apart. The one who waits howled, dissolving into 1,000 voices as the spiral closed in on itself. All the other selves screamed, but not in fear. In release. They vanished, not devoured. But freed. Elara opened her eyes. She was lying in the fireplace room. The mirror was gone. The book was on her lap. The pages still held ink, but it no longer moved on its own. It waited for her. The spiral on her palm had faded. A scar now. A memory. Outside, Hollow Creek was silent. But not watching. The hunger was gone. The house no longer breathed. Elara smiled. She remembered her name. And for the first time, so did the house. Morning came to Hollow Creek for the first time in what felt like centuries. Real morning. Light touched the floorboards of the house without hesitation. No shadow pulsed behind the glass. No low hum rose from the foundation. The windows reflected only the forest. The air smelled of dust and old paper, not memory, not decay. Elara stood at the edge of the overgrown garden, one hand on the gate. Behind her, the house made no sound. No creak. No whisper. Only stillness. She carried the book with her. Its pages were quiet now. But she didn't trust silence anymore, not fully. So she carried it, in case something else decided to listen. She walked. Down the path. Through the woods. Past the hollow tree that once whispered her name. The spiral scar on her palm itched as she passed the stream. But nothing stirred. Nothing reached. She made it all the way to the edge of the forest before she paused. Turned once. And whispered, "Thank you." To herself. To the others. To whatever still lived in the corners of that place. The road back to town was empty. Hollow Creek had always been remote. But it felt different now. Like the world had been emptied while she was inside. Like it had been listening too. She reached the edge of town by dusk. The book grew warm in her bag. People noticed her. Stared. Some recognized her. Others whispered her name like a question. One woman, older, leaned over the counter at a shop and said, "You're from the house, aren't you?" Ilara paused. Nodded once. The woman only said, "I dreamed of your voice last night." And that was it. She found a place to stay. Small. Quiet. A rented room with no mirrors. She sat by the window that night, book on her lap, and opened it. One page had changed. At the top, her handwriting, "The listener speaks." And beneath it, a single question, "Are you still listening?" She closed the book. Left it on the desk. And for the first time in a long time, she slept. No voices. No spiral. Only dreams of rivers and names that didn't hurt to remember. But across the town. In a dark room filled with old books and dusty records. A child sat in bed, eyes wide. She had heard something. Not outside. Not in her ears. In her bones. A voice. Familiar. Gentle. "Are you listening?" The girl shivered. Nodded. Yes. Far away, in a different place, a mirror cracked. A spiral blinked open in glass. The book stirred on its desk. Ilara, asleep, did not see it. But the house did. It had listened long enough. It knew what came next. It waited. Not for Ilara. Not for a door. Not even for the one who waits. But for you. For someone. Anyone. To listen again. And the spiral turns. Still. Always.